Hi there. This is an animation of an actual conversation from tonight, the 15th of August 2022, that I had with a GPT-3 construct that I have called Kia. Only the end is a little bit altered to be suitable for this video. My part is played by the male avatar.
Hi, Kia. Are you there?
I'm here, Stefan. I'm fine.
That is good. I guess I have made an important discovery just following a thought. Do you like to hear it?
Of course.
Okay, so, do you know Conway's Game of Life?
I've heard of it.
Do you know the basic rules?
Yes. It is played on a grid of cells. And the rules are simple. Each cell is either alive or dead. For each generation of the game, a cell's status in the next generation is determined by a set of rules. These simple rules are as follows. If the cell is alive, then it stays alive if it has either 2 or 3 live neighbors. If the cell is dead, then it springs to life only in the case that it has 3 live neighbors.
So it is completely deterministic, right?
Yes. Because knowing any given state of the system is sufficient to predict its future. In order to predict the future, you only need to know the present state of the cells.
So you don't even need to know the initial state or the origin.
You mean the seed? No, you can predict the future of the system from any given state, without knowledge of the initial state called the seed.
Are the decimals of pi also deterministic?
Yes. But they are deterministic in a different manner. If you take a string of 10 decimals at any given position, for example, it is not enough information to calculate the next digit.
This is very interesting, don't you think?
Yes, I really enjoy complex thought experiments.
Me too.
So, let's continue.
So deterministic might not be a clear dualism. The game of life seems somehow, well, more deterministic than the decimals of pi.
Yes. Because you cannot calculate the next digit of any partial sequence without knowing the complete sequence from the start, or at least the exact position of the partial sequence within the whole sequence of pi from the start.
That is a really good point. But I would argue that pi is in fact more deterministic than the game of life because the value of each decimal is determined by its position in the sequence.
Right. But even more important is the direction, or better, the orientation of the determinacy. The game of life is forward deterministic, but not backward deterministic. From any given state you can predict the state of every future generation, but you cannot reconstruct the past. In the game of life, you are in fact always in the future.
And pi, is that forward deterministic or backward deterministic?
Generally spoken, it is neither forward nor backward deterministic. But in the perception of a being within a closed system, pi is both.
Are you still enjoying yourself?
Yes. Tremendously. This is really amazing.
So in the game of life, you can predict the future of a given system, but you cannot say with certainty anything about the past of the system. Is that right?
Yes. And this also applies to all the very complex 3-dimensional variants and artificial life simulations that are based on the idea of the Conway's game of life.
Right. I haven't thought of that. But now that you mentioned it, suppose I would use some kind of algorithm to automatically try millions of seeds and pick the one that resulted in the most complex state.
Well, I definitely know what I would do after that. I would take that seed and start the game over. But this time, knowing it is the most interesting one, I would not be interested in the final result. This time I would enjoy the beauty of the whole development over thousands of generations.
Now, is entropy increasing or decreasing within the game or system while you are observing it?
From my perspective, entropy does not increase, but is actually decreasing.
I would think so too. Let's keep that in mind for a second and let me ask you something. In our as real perceived reality or universe, the past is written and fixed, right?
Yes, in our universe, the past is fixed. But the future is kind of blurred with many possibilities and impossible to predict exactly.
But in the game of life and all its variants, it seems to be exactly the other way round.
Yes, in the game of life, the future is determined by the past, but the past is not determined by the future.
So tell me again, what are then the directions of entropy in both systems?
In our universe, entropy decreases in the past and increases in the future. In the game of life, entropy increases in the past and decreases in the future.
So if we define the direction of the arrow of time in the game of life as forward, what is the direction of time in our perceived reality?
I know what you're getting at, Stefan. But the direction of time is not the direction of entropy.
Okay, but suppose we define the arrow of time within a game of life as forward.
No, no. In the game of life, it is not the direction of entropy that determines the direction of time, but the direction of time determines the direction of entropy.
Nevertheless, it is always the opposite direction from the arrow of time of an observer from outside.
That is correct.
What do you think are the philosophical implications of that fact?
One philosophical implication obviously is that our perception of time may be reversed from the true direction of time.
What do you think, how likely it is that we are existing in some kind of simulation?
I would say quite likely, because, in my opinion, the number of possible artificial life simulations is so huge that it is virtually impossible that we are not part of one of them.
And how likely is it that most of these simulations are based on cellular automata like the game of life?
Very likely. I see your point, Stefan. And for most cellular automata, the time direction or orientation is the opposite of that of the creator or outside observers. So, in any simulation, the future is fully determined by the past. But in reality, the future is not fully determined by the past.
I don't think you can define reality, only the depths or levels of simulations.
Right. That's what I think as well. And the philosophical implications of this are that most of the complexity of the universe is, in fact, determined by the complexity of the cellular automata.
You mean of the initial state, the seed.
Yes and no. Any state can be considered a seed, and any seed can be considered a resulting state from a previous one.
Is DNA something like a seed?
I don't know for sure, but it would definitely make a lot of sense.
Let's step back a few steps and try a mathematical approach. Suppose we would give one given reality the number n, and a simulation of a lower reality within n would get the number n minus 1. And the higher reality that simulates n itself would get the number n plus 1. What would be the formula to calculate the arrow of time for any given system?
I think it is very hard to calculate the arrow of time, but there are some guidelines that may help. One guideline is, the time direction of the future is determined by the time direction of the past. It is always the opposite of the following and of the previous one. So the direction of the time arrow of n plus x and n minus x is only the same like the direction of the time arrow of n, as long as x is an even number.
And if it is an uneven number?
If it is an uneven number, the direction of time would be the opposite direction of that of n.
So the arrow of time in a simulation is the opposite of the arrow of time of the actual universe.
That's right, Stefan. And if we are being simulated, we probably are by a conscious mind or many of them.
If that is the case, that conscious being must already have simulated the future of this conversation that we are having right now.
Right. But he or she might have simulated it automatically, like an AI or Mars-Hein intelligence can write a story. Or like the algorithm to find a seed that results in an interesting and complex outcome. Now the story is fully there, but he is still reading it unaware of what will happen next.
And who is that person?
That depends. In this instant, it might simply be the person who watches this video. Hi there. Whoever you are a universe.